Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being in Identiverse. I hope everyone's having a good week so far. I know I've loved the keynotes. This is my favorite conference because I get to nerd out with all the identity peeps around here. So real excited to be presenting today. I'm going to talk to you what I have learned is my role with Azure Active Directory at Microsoft about how to help you get your customers to strong authentication and how you can work with your customers to get them through that process, and hopefully scare you a little bit to say you need to start running today. A little bit about me, I'm a senior product manager with Microsoft Identity. I've been with the team since 2016, and I own our passwordless story in terms of getting our Azure Active Directory customers to passwordless and strong authentication. So that means I work with Windows Hello for Business, I work with our FIDO implementations, our auth app. Over the past year, we've had the opportunity to meet with a bunch of our customers. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that, but first I want to set some terms. When I talk about strong authentication, I'm talking about more than just a password. We all know, and I'm sure everyone in the room knows this, even at the bottom of your soul, that there is passwords which are bad, and we need to move to MFA. We know our customers struggle with it. And then there's good MFA, and it gets better and best. So when I talk about strong authentication, I'm really talking about, can you get to those phish-resistant, those platform credentials? Andrew Shikayar can say the term asymmetric public key cryptography faster than I can, but that's where we need to get to. So while I'm saying we need to move forward on strong authentication, know that I really mean go all the way as fast as you can. Why do I say that? Because phishing attacks are on the rise, and they are very, very, very successful. This graph is from Microsoft's Digital Defense Report. We published that last fall, and you can see that bright blue bar are our phishing attacks. And that is from last fall, and those bars are just getting bigger and bigger. If you didn't have a chance to see Alex Weiner and Tia Loudon's talk yesterday, they have more numbers that will scare you. We know from Verizon's Digital Breach Defense Report that 75% of organizations across the globe are getting phished. 75%, so your organizations are getting phished today. And we also know that users are bad at helping you be secure. There are those users who, no matter the training you give them, will click on that link. I can tell you a horror story. I used to be the PM of Microsoft's Authenticator app, and I had a customer, she was so nice, and she's like, oh yeah, I put my boss's account on there too, so I can just approve his notifications for him. Oh, bless your heart. How thoughtful, don't do that anymore. So we need to give our users ways to help you be more secure. That is through some steps that I will give you some more hints on. It is a real problem. You need to start working on it. From where I sit, the trends are all positive. Wouldn't we love if the stock markets would now start looking like this again, right? I will point out also that the y-axis, these are not the same axis, but our use of FIDO2 security keys has more than quadrupled over the past year. Our Windows Hello for Business customers, our monthly active users, has more than doubled over the past year. Using passwordless auth app has also gone up. Customers are getting the message. They are moving ahead. It's great to see, but we have a long ways to go. What this doesn't show you is that our passwordless usage is less than 2% of all Azure Active Directory monthly active users. 2%. Alex would have told you yesterday that MFA usage is 24%. On our consumer identity stack, it's also down at 2%. Doing strong authentication is hard for our users. So how do we get them there? How do you get your customers, or if you work in an organization as the identity professional, how do you get your own organization to move to stronger auth? Over the past year, I had the opportunity with a couple of my colleagues and Microsoft Get to Customer organization to do some deployment workshops. We met across the globe, 14 different sessions, over 700 individuals in identity space, over 300 customers represented. And we talked to them, we said, what are your challenges? What is, seriously, what is taking you so long? Let me put it nicer than that. And they all kind of gave us their feedback, what were their problems, and we were able to distill it into a set of challenges that I call the passwordless funnel or the strong authentication funnel. And this really is, if you think about like the Plinko game on Price is Right, where you drop a coin in at the top and it works its way down, Your user has to make it through this funnel in order to get to the bottom of, I am using and actively supporting strong authentication methods. So for the rest of the talk, I'm going to be talking about each one of these steps along the way. The first one is, and I think probably everyone in this room either works on a modern identity platform, is adopting a modern identity platform, but this is moving away from that on-premises directory of users. When it comes to using modern methods of authentication, you need a system that will support that modern authentication. I'm going to tell you that Active Directory is not going to build out a FIDO solution anytime soon. So congratulations from most of you in this room. I assume your organizations, your customers are at and working through this first step. The next piece comes to modern authentication of apps. I say demoing authentication has to be the most boring demo in the world because you go up and you type in your username and then you do your gesture and you're in, yay, hooray. But users don't authenticate because they think that passkeys are cool or they got to use Touch ID. They're doing that because they're trying to do their work, and most of them are doing their work through apps and services. So if you are dealing with an app catalog of 10,000, 40,000, 70,000 apps, how is your organization, how are your customers going to work through that to make sure that the apps that their users need will also support strong authentication? Some of our customers, they go through a big process and they try and catalog and they break it down into, okay, these apps, they work, they're good. These apps, we can go change their code, we can edit their auth library, great. These are apps that the developer has moved on or we are on a legacy version. How do you solve those challenges? Some of the things that we have heard that works is, for legacy apps, think about app proxies, what can you put in front? Again, more people in this room are probably brighter at this than I am and are thinking about those modern protocols that can help with that. I will tell you, I got a request the other day saying, hey, our app, the developer has moved on. It's using SAML protocol that requires password. Can you, Azure Active Directory, override that? And I'm like, no. But please, as app developers and protocol developers, think about what your app is asking for in that authentication that might future-proof it. And the last kind of organizational challenge really is going to take an identity professional a little bit maybe outside of their scope. Because now if you think about moving your strong authentication to not just this thing you know, but also this thing you have, that thing you have is going to be your device. And so now device management falls into your scope. And I talk to a lot of identity professionals and they're like, oh, well, that's our Windows team. We don't talk to them. Or, oh, that's managed by our device management group, and so MDM policy, that we don't deal with that. So your organizations might now have to start to expand their scope. You might have to build a broader V team to think about who you're bringing in to help you move to strong authentication. Device readiness comes down to not just what operating system you're using. Microsoft is building web authentication flows through the remote desktop protocol, so you can use a FIDO key on your host PC and then use it in your remote desktop protocol. That's only happening right now on Windows 11. So what operating system are you building up? Passkeys that iOS just announced, that's coming on iOS 16. So again, modern authentication, modern challenges really is going to require you to think about how are we moving our devices up faster, sooner, and getting them up to speed. Another thing with device readiness is, can they take advantage of these great new features of modern authentication like biometrics? If your organization has a big fleet of PCs, are you working with the people who own that hardware refresh cycle to say, hey, let's make sure that we are buying a PC that has a fingerprint reader on it, that has a hardware TPM module, can do facial recognition? The other area is device management. With the world of remote work, how are you treating BYOD devices and credentials that might be stored on those devices differently than an organizational or company-owned device? Those are all these challenges that as you start to think about, oh, we want to get our users to strong authentication, I guarantee you, you will hit these questions, and it's great to start thinking about that. The last piece of device readiness is kind of new and threw some of our customers for a loop, which is if you think about FIDO security keys, What are the use cases that you need to support here? Do you need USB-A or USB-C? Are you looking at retail frontline workers where maybe a tap-and-go NFC badge is more important? Who are the vendors out there that can support you? What are the services you want your vendors to provide? Some of them are more than happy to sell you a key and then get out of your life, and others would be happy to provide you with all those services. So really start to think about when you're talking about that thing you have for MFA, it's about your devices. The next part of that funnel is all about that credential lifecycle, and this is where we start to move from big organizational level questions to your users and groups and how you're going to support them as they go through their journey. Some of those challenges that we've talked with our customers about is often they'll be like, well, I've got these new users coming in, and what do we start them with? And I'm saying, but what about those 100,000 people that you already have, and how are you going to deal with them, and what is their experience as well? So there's different challenges depending on which groups you're talking about. Some of those challenges come around registration. How are you going to make sure that your users actually have that credential that you want them to use? What are you going to do to kickstart them to go register SMS or set up their Authenticator app or find that FIDO key and do the WebAuthn dance to register that key? And that differs depending on whether they already have existing credentials or they don't have existing credentials. For a new employee who's coming on that first day, what do you give them that gets them to strong authentication from day one? Microsoft built out temporary access pass as part of our solution. It's actually coming to general availability today. Super excited about that. But what that will do is allow you to, from day one, give your employee a short code where they can go and they can set up their PC, their auth app, their FIDO key, and use strong authentication from day one. Recovery is the flip side of that. And recovery from a consumer side of the house is very different from a recovery from an enterprise side of the house. Namely, that access to help desk is probably where most of our customers go. But now you're thinking about, what does our help desk do? If you've got a user who only has strong authentication methods, do you really want them to call into the help desk and say, oh yeah, I'm George, please reset my MFA credentials? I hope you all watched Rachel's talk yesterday where we saw that that's really not a good idea. So what are your identity verification solutions? What workflows do you need to change when you move to strong authentication? These are questions that I think as an industry we are all starting to talk about how to solve. I love the idea of using verifiable credentials as a way to kickstart this. But you do need to think about your weak links in your recovery chain to make sure that once you get your users to that strong barrier, that strong authentication level, they stay there. All of this comes back to change management. I hope everyone had a chance to watch Ian's talk yesterday because I was like nodding my head and singing along and saying, yeah, go girl. But it is really going to be a foundational change for your users who have been using passwords for so long. And even if they're doing SMS OTP, which more and more consumers are getting the hang of, now moving them beyond that is going to be like, why do I need to do this other new thing? It's even harder or more difficult, or I just don't understand it. I love Ian's suggestion of hire a writer. The customers that we've met with who have been most successful with getting to passwordless and getting to strong authentication really have invested in their communications. They have built campaigns. They talk about, why are we doing this? What are we doing? By when will you do it? How will we know you've done it? And they lay out those communications, and they target their communications to each one of those users. So maybe this week we're going after our finance department, and we're going to say, you know, this week you all have to register your credential. And then they measure that and show their success. And then the next week they set up a different communication. And the reason for that change management is, frankly, it all comes down to educating your users. That user who approved her boss's auth app notifications just didn't understand what, in fact, she was doing and why that was a security barrier. Again, we see this in our consumer side of the house. We ran an experiment and we said, set up the Microsoft Authenticator app. It will make you more secure. Or set up your Microsoft Authenticator app. It will get you to your files easier. That get you to your files easier message had a 5-time greater uptake than the be more secure. So think about what messages you want to share with your users And again, that depends on the audience and how are you going to get them to consistently know what they're doing and update. Because if your user doesn't understand, then they aren't going to be able to help you in your security message and your security journey. And this last bit is an area where I will say that we have a ways to go on making sure that our users are consistently using those strong authentication methods. How do we enforce that, hey, you have a FIDO key, don't use your password next time. Please go ahead and continue using that strong authentication method. I love the work that Vittorio is proposing with the step-up authentication and making sure that we can force those use of stronger credentials in an authentication where we need a greater sense of security. But this is more about helping your users build that habit of always using the strong authentication method. That includes things that we've heard, like making sure you're taking advantage of on-device authentication. It's a lot easier to log in on a Windows device if you've set up SSO, and you can take advantage of the credential on the device and then never have to log in again. That's one of the best ways to go passwordless, is to just never use your password. Passwordless, using passwords less. And then the last part of that is making sure that you are looking at what your users are doing. And we have reports, and you can look at your login tools and say, hey, you know what? We did this great registration campaign. 80% of our users registered for OTP. Only 40% are actually using MFA. How are you going to enforce that? We're working to build you those tools. I think as an industry, we have a ways to go in terms of making sure that we are enforcing that strong authentication. But at the end of the day, it's about making sure your user knows to keep using that stronger authentication method. And then what we heard a lot from our customers was, you know, we made some progress and we had to stop, or we got, you know, this pilot running and then we had to move on to other priorities. And so for our customers who were successful, it was about building support as they went. Accenture just published a case study of how they took the organization fully passwordless, and they ate the elephant one bite at a time. It was about, first we're going to roll out Windows Hello for Business to this set of users, and then we're going to move them to give them better strength on their authenticator apps to go passwordless. And now they're working on FIDO security keys. But they did it over the span of 3 years, and now they're working with us on how can I actually turn off our passwords? How can we hide passwords on that Windows desktop? And they did it because they took it in chunks. If you wait and think, oh, we need to solve all of our edge cases and corner cases before we can even start moving, you're going to be waiting a really long time. So one project at a time. This is something that Microsoft itself does. We started with Windows Hello for Business, and now every user in Microsoft uses Windows Hello for Business on their daily PCs or their secure access workstations. The other thing is about piloting. Start small. We had a customer in Dallas that they were getting a lot of pressure to change their passwords to 16-character for compliance reasons. And they said, oh, our users are going to hate that. But then they also said, or you could go passwordless, we'll give you a gift card, you can try this Windows Hello thing. And turns out that the people who went for Windows Hello, not only did they get to avoid the carrot or the stick of having to use a 16-character password, but they loved the passwordless experience so much that they started telling their coworkers. And those coworkers like, hey, how do I get in on this? And so it was that pilot of, we'll start small. It really helped build that momentum. The other thing is, once you do that pilot, learn. Another customer did a pilot of 200 people, and they surveyed them at the beginning, in the middle, and the end of what do you think about what we're about to do to you? How is it going? How did it work? And from those survey results, they were able to then take those learnings and improve for that next batch, for that next course of users who are going through strong authentication. And so it made it that much smoother, and they actually then put their C-suite in their 4th round. They took 3 rounds to learn what went right, what went wrong, and how to make sure that when you go into those executive suites that it's going to work seamlessly and they can just get started and move forward with strong authentication. The last bit, and again, I love the fact that Ian said bring your data team on with you, because dashboards are your friend. We have a financial customer in DC that has a dashboard that shows these people are registered with MFA, these people have their Windows device all set up, now we can go turn off their password. And they track that as a metric. We had another customer that ran competitions between 2 vice presidents who can get registration fastest across the organization. So those dashboards are really your friend. It also allows you to go and show your success. Hey, look, we got this many people moved to strong authentication, moving to MFA, using it on a regular basis, and that's going to help you as you go through those projects to build that support and move forward with your C-suite. I think I probably went a little fast, but that leaves us plenty of time for questions. What I want you to take away from this is, you know, my colleague Alex Weiner always used to say, you don't have to outrun the bear, right? You just need to make your organization stronger than the next guy when it comes to getting attacked. And I think for those of us in the room, we want to be a little better than that. This is about getting all of us to a better place. So no one wants to be that next SolarWinds. No one wants to face that next Lapsus attack. So take these learnings and share them with your customers, with your colleagues, to get them on their journey today too. And then let's work together to help all of our organizations be more secure. Think about what you're learning this week and how you can apply it moving forward. And then come back next year and share it with us. Thank you. Oh, right on time. We're definitely looking at how we can make that phish resistant, yes.
Is there a timeline around that? Can you share?
My colleague Scott over here is working on passkeys, so we're trying to keep it in the family.
In terms of a step-up authentication, can an RP say, I don't like this access token, I want an extra value of authenticating with passkey instead of, like, let's say, with often?
That's probably a better question for Vittorio and Brian Campbell as they work on that specification. I can tell you that within Azure AD, we want to give you the capability that says, oh, look, you are accessing this sensitive resource. We are going to require you to use a phishing-resistant credential to access that. Good question.
So you had mentioned SAML providers that require passwords. We have a couple of those we have found after we moved to Windows 11. Do you have any recommendations on how we could influence those people or those companies to make changes?
I wish I had better recommendations. I'm not the SAML protocol expert. If you have sway with the vendor that is providing you with those apps, I would strongly encourage them to modernize, to accept more credentials than just a password. Otherwise, we're going to have to talk to you about, like, what can you do to put auth in front of that protocol.
Public shame.
That's my plea to standards people in the room, developers in the room. Excellent. Thank you. Go forth and preach MFA.